Hey everyone, it's Alison Heikkila. Thank you so much for joining me. We are going to play with this beautiful large blossom die set from Sizzix and Tim Holtz. You can see the name back here with the item number. I picked this up a couple of months ago and I haven't had a chance to play with it, and I thought today was a really good time to do it. Now, if you don't have this die set, don't worry. There are plenty of die sets out there that will do this same kind of effect with layering. Altenew has a bunch. I know that I own one or two from Altenew myself that do a smaller flower, but you can do the same techniques that we're doing today with those. There's probably other companies as well that have some layering die sets that you can use this with. So if you don't have Blossom, that's okay. Check your stash, see what you do have. Or if you love this one, grab it, because man, look at how big it is. It's huge. Look at my hands with this. Let's see. This piece here is 4 inches. It's 4 inches wide. That's a big flower. We might wind up chopping some of it off when we put it on our card, but I have no idea where this is going to go. But we're going to have an art lesson. Art lesson time. Okay, so we are not going to just use plain cardstock for this. It's beautiful that way, but I have so many monoprints because I am a gel press junkie and I love, love, love making monoprints. In fact, you may have seen my monoprint Mondays. I've stopped doing them, but I've got like 80 something shorts here on YouTube that you can check out if you want to see quick little monoprints being made. There's also a playlist that is all about gel printing, so you can definitely check that out too. So I have amassed a very large assortment of gel prints because I never make just one. It's got to be at least 2 or 3. And if I'm having a really good session, it might be 20 or 30. So I've got a lot. So let us first talk about the gel press prints that don't work. And you can, if you're not a mono printer, that's fine. Think about this in terms of patterned paper. Okay, because you might have patterned paper. So let's think about monoprints and patterned paper as the same in this scenario. I'm going to explain which ones work and which ones don't before we get to making the card. If you don't want to hear all of this, then just fast forward to when I actually start die cutting, and then, you don't have to listen to all of this. But I hope that this is helpful to at least some of you. Okay. So again, we've got these dies here. You can see that this is a large base die. We're going to use a solid color for this, just because there's not a whole lot that shows. And I don't really want to, I hate to say waste a print with it, but I don't want to use a print on something that you really don't see very much of. Okay, so we are going to use solid cardstock for the layer that shows brown here. Okay, now, so we're going to focus on these two. Okay, what kinds of prints, monoprints or pattern paper would we want to not use? Okay, so here, first of all, and we're going to use this die as representation for all of them, just because it's solid and you can get a good visual. This is a little tricky to understand because it's got a lot of negative and positive space. So we're going to use this one as an example. So this print was made with acrylic paint and I think string. I could be wrong. I might have just drawn on it. It doesn't matter. The point is, if you have this, you've got some really cool color shifts happening here, right? But if we were to put that on there, you're going to miss a lot of that because there's hardly any of this lighter pink, or there's hardly any orange. And if we shift it down, then you only have the pink and the orange. And then you have these weird black lines where you might have a black line here, you might have a black line here, and that's it. And it might be just confusing. It's like, why are those 2 lines there or 3 lines? So this print is too open and the colors are spaced too far apart for something like this. This I would just kind of cut to 4 by 5 1/4 and use it as a background and maybe slap like a critter on here or a big sentiment or something and call it a day. So this is not going to work. Same kind of thing goes for this one. You've got, these 3 areas of color, but if you were to put that there, look, you have hardly any of these colors. So if you just want yellow, okay, fine, you could do that. But as a print overall, it's not really going to work. If you shift it up, then you've kind of cut the color in half, and it doesn't really look that appealing. It's like, well, why is there this sudden shift of color happening? Same thing if you go down here. Now, the Greek key that's on here, it's not really a Greek key. It kind of reminds me of a Greek key. I don't like that for this either because it's so straight and angular. This is an organic shape. It's a flower. I don't want to have super straight, unorganic lines happening on something that's so whimsical, soft, and curvy. Okay, so there's two reasons why we're not going to use this. Okay, two reasons on both of these. The color separation is too far apart and you'll miss the cool stuff that's happening. And then the types of lines. There's too few lines happening here. And then with this, they're too angular and straight. Not going to work for this. Okay, moving on. This one's not going to work, similarly to that last one that I showed you, because it's too angular. Ignore the fact that there's so much black. I mean, I wouldn't want to use it because it's so dark anyway on this particular layer. But those squares are just going to be really confusing when you have an organic shape like this. Not really the best choice, okay? This one, print is way too big, okay? This is really cool what's happening here. This is really cool. But if I were to put this on there, you're going to lose all of that. If I put it here, you're going to lose all of that because although this is a large die, the print itself is interesting on a large scale. So if we were to trim it down too much, you're going to lose all of the cool details. Like you might not even realize that these are leaves if you put that on there. Okay, so having a print that's too large is not going to work either. The shapes that are happening in here are okay with this. Not quite my favorite because they're not straight lines, but they're kind of too clean. But I like this print large the way it is. So again, even if you don't do monoprints, think about your patterned papers in a similar way because many of you probably have like 12 by 12 scrapbook paper where there's like a grid pattern or polka dots or something, and then there's like a big thing in the corner. You don't want to use that big thing in the corner because it's not really going to make sense once you cut it down, right? But if you have polka dots or a little grid, that could be kind of interesting on here. So keep in mind, you want the shapes to be sort of organic. You want the print to be sort of small. And you don't want to have strange lines or shapes that don't quite make sense because they're not repeated throughout. Okay? Here, we have some prints that would work. Okay? We've got some dots. We've got some variation in color. And it's just small enough where you'll see that there's polka dots and you'll see that there's color shift happening. And it will be interesting enough and not confusing to the eye. So this would be a good one to use. Not what we're using today, but it would definitely work. Here's another one. So this is cool once I hold it up to the light because I used a shimmery, literally color shifting acrylic paint. I keep saying a shift in color, and that's not really the right way to explain it. You can see how colors go from green to like an orange, whatever, and then to a blue. That's what I was referring to before, but this is a true color shift. You could see how that changes with the luster, the way the light hits it. So this would be fun to use because it's got a really tiny pattern happening here. This is a print that I don't love as a print, as a monoprint, but I think that if you use it for something like this, it could work nicely. Now, granted, you wouldn't quite get a whole lot of both colors unless you kind of split it somehow. But because there's only a couple of colors here, you can kind of sneak away with working with this, kind of, sort of. That one would work, this side here. This one, not quite so much because there's not enough pink to cover the whole thing. But I pulled this one specifically because of all of these small little things that are happening here. And I think that that would work really well with this floral. Next one. This one has a great print overall. It's a honeycomb. And granted, they have straight edges, but because of the way it printed, there's enough interest happening that it's not too straight. It's not stripes, you know, and it's kind of coming in and out, obvious, less obvious. And then you have all of this little bursting of color happening here. And I think that that would be a really fun print to use with this floral too. Lots of cool stuff happening here. Then there's this one. This one is not super interesting, but it has some interesting stuff happening when you break it down. You know, like you might say, oh, well, right here, there's some purple, there's some teal, there's a break between that cream and that kind of brick color, and that could be a cool spot to work with. I probably wouldn't use it up here because there's a whole lot of that cream happening, and I don't love that. But this would be a good one to use too, as like a cool wash of color. Then there's this one. Again, you've got a cool print happening here. Where's the one that I'm actually using? There it is. I found it. And I think that that could be fun too. This was done with like a mesh, something or another. I don't know. And I think I had a bag on top that I impressed into, like, to give a plastic look. It might have been saran wrap. But this has some cool things happening. You can kind of position it so you've got some of this mahogany color here and here, and it wouldn't look out of place if it was just on one side. It would be like, well, why is that happening? But if you have it on a couple of spots, make it interesting. So I almost decided on using that one, but instead we're going to use this one. I love all the colors that are happening here. I don't love this central area, but that's okay because we can do that and it won't even be there. But I do want to make sure that I capture some of this orange because the papers that I'm going to use with it, I have a bunch of stuff here, guys. I'm actually prepared, sort of. I'm prepared with the flower and the foliage, not with the rest of the card. Anyway, so this is going to be our base layer. So that's going to be this, okay? I like the idea of using a brown. I could have gone with black, but I wanted to warm it up a bit. So this brown is nice and rich. So we're going to use that. Then this is going to be this layer. And then, lo and behold, I forgot to get another layer. I think I put it somewhere else. I'll have to grab it in a second. This is going to be our center. This is actually not a monoprint. This is a really old scrapbook paper, but it looks like a monoprint. So this and this are going to be our centers. These two pieces here. And then I've got these greens. This is like a holiday paper. There's like a reindeer and some cool foiling things happening. That's going to be for our foliage. So this will be our bottom layer. And then this area here will be our top layer. Because although I'm not really interested in having this circular pattern, I like what's happening with it. And it'll get broken up nicely on this little tiny layer that goes on top. So I need to just grab this layer because I don't know what I did with it. And then I will get all of this cut. We'll assemble, and then we'll make the rest of the card. I've die cut everything, and I erred before when I was laying out my pieces. I used the monoprint for the top layer of the flower, and this nice, deep, tealy turquoise color for the middle layer. And by the way, this is a really rad splatter. So don't throw this out because, man, that is so cool. I had seen people use this piece before when this die first came out, and I love this. It's really cool. So I'm just going to separate all of these things. Leave these off to the side. Check out how beautiful this bloom is. My goodness, I love it. All right, we've got these little bits here. Make sure you take those out. And I'm using different weights of paper and cardstock. Don't worry about that. It's okay. You can totally do that. This is like a glossy cardstock. Look at this leaf. Isn't that cool? See how we've pretty much lost that circular pattern it had? It's there a little bit, but you really don't notice it anymore, and it just gives a really cool look to the foliage. Gotta get my pokey tool for this. Poke this out. Let's see what we've got there. If it decides to come out. There we go. So that's the bottom layer of the floral center. And then the top layer is this piece that already sort of looks like it's monoprinted. Popping out the excess. And I'm struggling, guys. That's okay. Almost got it. Here we go. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Now this is the one that we're all waiting for, right? Ooh! And this is on just copy paper. So it's going to take me a second to probably remove it. Okay, here is that piece. Look at how cool that is. And again, this center area is just a really cool splatter. So hang on to that, especially because of the way this print looks. Okay. So let's see how this is going to look when we get this all together. I've got some extra pieces here. Okay, so I'm going to be honest. It took me a couple of minutes to like pull the copy paper out of the die and then to try to line it up. So I said, you know what? I'm going to just glue it all off screen because it's taking too long. And also, tell me in the comments if this has happened to you. I know it happened to my friend Amy from Amy's Wares. When you get down to the bottom of your Barely Arts glue, did it just get really thick and like impossible to squeeze out? Because that is what's happening. I have one of the refills and I filled up my little bottle and man, it is killing my hand because my hands give me problems as it is. If you watch my channel at all, you know sometimes I have ring splints on, sometimes I have other things on, and squeezing it is just really uncomfortable. So has that happened to you? And then what did you do about it? Okay, so here's our flower. With 20/20 hindsight, perhaps I should have used a lighter color for that base layer, but again, this is the first time I've done this one. So I still think it's beautiful, but I think that I might need something bright behind it for our main layer, our focal layer, so that this really pops. And here is our leaf, which is really cool. I love how that came out. Look at that. I love this. I think it's really nice. And although it's a little dark, it's kind of how I roll anyway, so it's all good. So while I was looking through my papers and cardstocks and stuff, I came across this corrugated cardboard, and I think it would look really cool with this because it's got this fantastic texture. But again, because the flower is a little dark, I think that I want to colorize it and make it brighter. So how are we going to do that? I don't know. Maybe I'll spray it. Maybe I'll rub some Distress Oxides. I think that the Distress Oxides might be a good option. Maybe like Wild Honey or something. I don't know. I have to see what colors I have. So I'm going to trim this down and then we will alter the color. Okay, I've got Fossilized Amber and Spiced Marmalade, and we're going to see what this does. Let's just mess around with it. That's okay. If I had the Distress spray stains, no, not the stains, the Oxide sprays, I think that would be a little bit more effective. We have some things happening here. It might be a little tricky to see. I don't hate it. I feel like it needs more, though. Okay, so I wasn't planning on adding anything shimmery to this, but I don't have Distress Oxide sprays in like a yellow or an orangey color. So I have Cantaloupe Fireworks spray, and we're going to just, yeah, see, that's good. That's adding the color I want. You could do this with watercolors maybe, but, you know, the thing is I want it to be a little opaque, and at least the shimmer adds some opacity to it. So that is much better. I like that. I think that that's going to add something cool. And it makes that ribbing pop out, the corrugation, because it's got a shadowing to it. Okay, clean this up. I dried this a bit with my heat tool just to speed up the process. And I have a white card base here, which we are not going to keep white. And I just wanted to make mention, because I forgot before, since I used copy paper for this monoprint, if that concerns you because it's so thin, you can absolutely adhere it to a layer of cardstock before running it through your die cut machine. I didn't do that this time, although sometimes I do, but I didn't this time because I knew that I was going to have 2 other layers of cardstock and I didn't really think it was necessary. But if you're worried about how delicate something is, definitely adhere it to some cardstock first and then you can die cut it. So before we start adhering this down, I need to colorize this card base. So we're going to use some Warm Breeze VersaFine Clair, which looks really great with that layer of, on the flower, the layer that's on the middle layer of the flower. And I'm just going to add my ink like so. This is different from regular pigment inks because regular pigment inks kind of, if you touch them, they'll get onto your finger and they'll smudge and whatnot. This, if you let it sit for a couple of seconds, it will set. You're still able to emboss it for a while if you want to. We're not today, but you can. but it's not going to smudge the way some other pigment inks are going to. This is going to go like this. Now we want to preserve the orange because I really love the orange. This is a little less interesting. So I'd like to kind of have this hanging off the edge like so. And maybe have that leaf over here. We can cut that off if we want to. I don't think that I really want it up here. Nah. What we could do, maybe what I'll do is I'll cut it, and then that other leaf that's hidden right now can go over here. That'll look good. Let's do that. Don't be afraid to play around with your die cuts and make them work for you. See, that doesn't even look like it's missing anything, right? And then we can stick this guy here, which again doesn't look like it's missing anything. Oh, I love that. And then we can just stick a sentiment there. So I'm going to glue this, and then we'll move on to our sentiment. I grabbed this sentiment set. This is one of my all-time favorite sentiment sets. It's Noteworthy from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. And I stamped out Make Today Amazing on the same teal cardstock I used for the second layer with VersaFine Clair in Nocturne. I love Nocturne ink. Okay, I glued that all down. I've got to trim these pieces off, but this is a little flat for me. So we're going to grab the fireworks spray, give it a bit of a shake, and carefully open it up without spilling it everywhere. I've got a brush, dipping that in, and now I'm going to just go around the edge here with this brush, using the little pinhole there as a guide for how far in to go. But you don't have to be perfect with this. It's okay. It's really not going to alter it too much. It's going to give it shimmer and darken those edges a bit. It's turning a little green because, you know, blue and yellow make green. But I don't mind that at all because we've got just a little bit of green on our foliage and that's it. So that just does a little something extra to it. See? Add some shimmer. It's going to dry back a bit too. Make sure you close this up. Don't spill it. This is the banner die set that I used. It's from Avery, Elle. I don't know if it's still available. It's from a long time ago. If it is, I'll link it. If not, I'm sorry. But you might have a banner die in your stash. So now I'm going to just turn this over, trim off these excess pieces of the flower. And that's it. We have our finished card. I think it's really cool. I love that we got to use a funky mono print like this, along with some pattern paper. I think it came out great. So I hope you have some fun ideas on how to use pattern paper or mono prints in this type of way. Yeah, you can just make a whole bunch of these and get them prepped for cards to make in the future. Just get out your paper and play. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I will be back very soon with another video. Be well, stay safe. Peace out.